With all the new gameplay footage surrounding the Prismatic Subclass, we now have the names and descriptions of all 21 fragments, which will soon be available. And to be honest, there is a lot here. An insane amount of customization and pairings between the rest of the Prismatic kit, which is amazing to see, and will make creating a build to fit your exact ideals much more of a possibility. So here's the 9 most recently revealed fragments. Facet of Courage. Your light abilities deal increased damage to targets affected with a darkness debuff. This one is actually somewhat familiar to players who were active during Season of the Lost. It's essentially the seasonal mod focusing lens, but allowing for both strand and stasis debuffs. And when this was available, it was actually quite potent. And it's probably going to be even more so for Prismatic, as you can apply both darkness debuffs and light abilities yourself, and with a strong uptime. This one is quite specific on numbers though. I do have my doubts it will be 25% bonus damage like focusing lens was. Maybe something more around the 10% mark. But if this is a decent buff, it will add so much to any Prismatic build running something like the Star Eater class items with a light super, or speccing into rapid ability cycling. This fragment is universally strong across the 3 classes too. Hunter, I'm thinking Celestial Golden Gun with an easy to access strand debuff in Threaded Spike. Titans of course have Thunder Crash and Warlock's Nova Bomb. Facet of Blessing. Melee final blows start health regeneration. Whilst Transcendent, melee final blows start health regeneration for you and nearby allies. This is based on the Void Fragment Echo of Leeching, which I did actually find to be quite useful to have as part of a Void Titan kit, and will likely be even more so on a Prismatic Titan kit. You could use this as a survivability tool with high impact melees such as Consecration or Thunderclap. Hunters could possibly use this with Knife Trick or Threaded Spike, but in my opinion the Hunter de facto melee build will likely be Combination Blow, which already has Restoration built into it by default. Warlocks could use this alongside Incinerator Snap, as ignitions caused by this are treated as melee final blows, so getting that restoration proc should be quite easy. Facet of Mending. Grenade final blows cure you. Transcendent grenade final blows increase the strength of this effect. This is quite similar to the last one, but with grenades this time. This fragment is quite universally strong if sustain is something you are looking for. Now this isn't really a downside as such, but it is worth mentioning that for most content, you don't actually need to really go too far into sustain. 1 or 2 methods are more than enough, and you might actually be better off focusing on more aggressive build options to clear activities faster rather than just finding ways to survive for longer. However, having access to Transcendence grenades is also a huge boost for this fragment, as these have shorter cooldowns and more potent effects, and I'd say this fragment is pretty much equally as useful across all classes. Facet of Honor. Collecting an elemental pickup or destroying a Tangle grants Transcendence energy, of the same type. So this is the first fragment to mention Transcendence, so just a little bit on that first. It's quite functionally similar to a super in needing to charge up progress bars to activate, and will remain active for a short time thereafter. Whilst it is active, your grenade abilities will be replaced with a combination grenade, as well as all abilities recharging quicker. All weapons will deal a 5% stacking additional damage, and you will have resistance to incoming damage. Basically, Transcendence alone is quite the huge reason to be using Prismatic, so fragments which allow for increased uptime of Transcendence will always hold value. The more ways you have to create elemental pickups, and ideally creating both light and dark options, the better this becomes. Certain exotics can also hugely enhance this fragment. Dragon's Breath can create a lot of fire sprites, while Wicked Implement is a consistent source of stasis shards, and there's plenty more. This will require some building into, but I could actually see the payoffs being worth your time. Facet of Sacrifice. Whilst you have a light buff, ability final blows grant bonus darkness Transcendence energy, so this is another part of the Transcendence package. I'm going to quickly call to another fragment I'll cover later here in the Facet of Dawn. This one provides Radiant upon melee hits, and these two will work hand in hand. Any melee heavy build will benefit a lot from Facet of Sacrifice and Facet of Dawn together, so Hunters and Titans, this is looking quite nice. But this does not mean this fragment is worse on Warlock. It actually could be better. The aspect Feed the Void would allow for ability final blows to grant Devour. And the nice thing about Devour is it also helps to retain grenade energy, as well as refreshing its own duration on all kills. So you have a light buff which will remain active and allow for more abilities, which in turn allows for more Darkness Transcendence energy. Facet of Devotion. Defeating targets afflicted with a Darkness debuff grants bonus light Transcendence energy. And here's the balance to that extra Transcendence energy package. If you are running Facet of Sacrifice, you should be running Facet of Devotion, since you can be amplified by a light buff while applying Darkness debuffs simultaneously. Facet of Devotion will require a little bit of working around in order for it to be worthwhile. My best advice would be to look at synergistic weapon perks. Chill Clip for slow, Slice for sever, those sort of things. And of course you can just use abilities too. For certain, Bleak Watcher will be incredible for this. Facet of Command. Freezing or suppressing a target reloads your equipped weapons and increases stability, aim assist and airborne effectiveness. Defeating frozen or suppressed targets creates a stasis shard or void breach. This fragment here was the one I was looking forward to seeing, as it answers the question of what methods will Prismatic have to auto reload weapons. With how popular methods such as Rain of Fire and Thread of Ascent have been for increasing weapon DPS, this one is incredibly important. However, it's also a very hard call, mainly because the cooldown is just not currently known, and there is likely to be one. Another consideration here is activation criteria. Freezing and suppressing tools are not as readily available as weapon reload options on other subclasses, but there are some possibilities which could be potent. Silence and Squall may actually be incredible here when used on a single target and achieving multiple freezes per cast. Duskfield to a lesser extent too. Titans you have Suppressor Grenade and Diamond Lance as quick methods of activation, but both are one-off casts, so I'm not confident on this for the longer damage phases. For your Warlocks, Bleak Watchers could again work really well, and especially so if you have multiple active, will rapidly freeze targets over and over. Also, in the rare chance of there being no cooldown, here's something which just might be quite funny. Conditional Finality will be able to instantly reload its first shot, as it will apply freeze every time. Facet of Awakening. Rapid elemental final blows and super final blows generate an elemental pickup of a matching damage type. This fragment I don't really see as being as valuable as some of the other options on the list, but it does however have some nice synergy with Facet of Honor. It's also very universally functioning with any weapon or ability, with the exception of kinetics. For the most effective use of this, rapid defeats of Arc, Solar or Stasis will be optimal, as these pickups do not have a cooldown associated with them. Overall though, not hugely impressed with this one, but it is a reasonable filler pick as it's universally applicable. Facet of Solitude. Rapid precision hits emit a severing burst from the target. While Transcendent, this effect is amplified. If you do require an easy to access Darkness debuff, then this fragment will do that for you. This reads the same as the Strand Fragment Thread of Isolation, so it's a reasonable assumption that it will function the same. This activates based on the number of precision hits per weapon archetype, so essentially the faster RPM weapons of each archetype will be better for activating this. And there's also a few edge cases to maximise the effectiveness here. There's a few weapons which can hit multiple times per shot. Trinity Ghoul will activate the Sever effect instantly, as will triple fire linear fusion rifles. Of course, if your setup consists of grenade launchers and rocket sidearms, this fragment won't really be doing a hell of a lot for you. So, those are the 9 recently revealed fragments, some really good stuff in there. But just as a refresher, here's the remaining 12. I will try to get through these ones just a little bit quicker though. Facet of Purpose. Picking up an Orb of Power grants either Amplified, Restoration, Frost Armor, Woven Mail or Overshield, based on the damage type of your equipped super. The effectiveness here depends just entirely on your super of choice. Of these options, Woven Mail stands out as probably the most powerful. Restoration is not too shabby either. If the effect it provides synergizes with the rest of your build, this does have potential to be excellent, but in a lot of cases will be overshadowed by other options. Facet of Hope. While you have an elemental buff, your class ability regenerates more quickly. Hunters could actually utilise this really simple loop. Use Acrobat's dodge to grant Radiant, and that Radiant effect will reduce Acrobat's dodged cooldown. A nice way to maintain a light elemental buff which will have synergy with other fragments, as well as Radiant just being quite powerful. Hunters can also use this with Marksman's dodge to more frequently reload weapons depending on the cooldown reduction. Again, this could be quite potent. On Titans and Warlocks, I see less value here unless specifically built into, for example, that Titan exotic which fires rockets on class ability usage. Facet of Ruin increases the size and damage of shattering a stasis crystal or frozen target. Increases the size of solar ignitions. Shatter damage is actually being heavily increased, so maybe that side of it isn't actually as useless as it can feel right now. Ignitions though are no pushover, and all classes do have access to these. Hunters via the Caliban's perk on the exotic class item, Titans with Consecration, and Warlocks Incinerator Snap. However, compared to some other fragments, this one doesn't really provide much synergy with other parts of Prismatic, and the increased radius will not always be noticeable, unless enemies just so happen to be that perfect distance away from each other. Facet of Dawn. Powered melee hits against targets make you radiant. Powered melee final blows make both you and nearby allies radiant, so this is functionally similar to Ember of Torches, which is a very good solar fragment. And to no surprise, this is also a very good prismatic fragment, but maybe even better, as having a light buff such as Radiant will synergise with other prismatic fragments quite well. And other subclasses have spammable melee options to keep high uptime on Radiant. I think Titans take the win here, utilising Knockout for infinite powered melees. Hunter can do the same with Combination Blow, but also they have Acrobat's dodge instead. Warlocks will be ideally using Arcane Needle for its multiple charges, as well as applying a Darkness debuff at the same time. Facet of Protection. While surrounded by enemies, you are more resistant to incoming damage. While Transcendent, the effect is increased. A universal damage resistance option, so can range from not needed at all to a lifesaver, depending on the difficulty of content as well as your playstyle. This fragment will suit the more aggressive playstyle, and I can see it being a reliable choice for Combination Blow Hunter. Facet of Balance. Rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy. Rapidly defeating targets with dark damage grants grenade energy. If you're running an ability focused build, this will probably be worthwhile. It's very generic, but will act as a motor for ability uptime. Realistically, any rapid defeats will be providing some kind of ability energy. Facet of Bravery. Defeating targets with grenades grant volatile rounds to your void weapons. Defeating targets with powered melees grant unravelling rounds to your strand weapons. Both effects provided here are quite useful. Unravelling rounds especially, as it will contribute as a darkness debuff, though this fragment is one you should only use if your weapon loadout does complement it. I wouldn't say this one's worth changing your weapon loadout around just to fit the criteria. Facet of Defiance. Finishers create a detonation that either jolts, scorches, slows, severs, or makes targets volatile, based on the damage type of your equipped super. Acquiring a finisher is quite a steep step required for an elemental debuff, though if it is required for an ability loop or achieving Transcendence quicker, I think this one is just about fine as a filler fragment. Facet of Dominance. Your void grenades weaken targets, your arc grenades jolt targets. Echo of Undermining and Spark of Shock, which this fragment borrows its effects from, are both incredibly powerful on their respective subclasses. And the same is true here. Some classes can benefit more than others, however. Hunter with Arc Bolt and Magnetic Grenade as its two matching options is not really fantastic, but Titans featuring Pulse and Suppressor Grenades could get more use out of this. Warlocks too having Storm and Vortex Grenades, either of these two options are a strong starting point. Facet of Generosity. Defeating targets whilst Transcendent creates an orb of power for your allies. Actually quite interesting, though not sure on its overall impact. If this generates an orb of power on each enemy defeated whilst Transcendent, this will actually be huge. Though there's already quite a few fragments semi-required to maximise Transcendence, and this one is expendable if you don't have the required slots. Facet of Grace. Damaging targets with kinetic weapons grants you bonus Transcendence energy. Defeating targets with your super grants you and nearby allies bonus Transcendence energy. A really good method if you want to maximise Transcendence uptime without having to juggle light and dark damage, or utilise other fragments such as Facet of Sacrifice and Devotion. Of course, this one does have a requirement of running a kinetic weapon, and this should be your primary weapon to maximise uptime. Though there are some good options here, you could maybe even go with a new Vostok. The other understated benefit here is this fragment can cover Transcendence by itself, meaning you'll have more fragment slots available to enhance your general gameplay loop. Facet of Justice. While Transcendent, your ability final blows cause explosions. This one seems to be a bit overkill, especially with how potent the Transcendent grenades are at base. Whilst you do get higher ability uptime during Transcendent, which can allow for more potential explosions, I think you'll be doing more than enough ad clear just at base. And finally, that is all 21. Hopefully you have some idea of potential combos and just all round strong fragment choices. But we all know it's going to be weeks of experimenting, and I'm sure some surprises will certainly arise from that. Thank you for watching.